Today we are going over 5 decks of cards that I usually see related to cardistry. Now this is not a full list, this is just 5 decks that I chose because why not? I do want to say that I do not have 2 out of these 5 decks, but I still wanted to mention them because they're, what I've heard, they're really good decks of cards. So let's get into it. And starting with the standard cards. Our first deck are the Tally-Hoes. Now this is US Playing Card Company, and they come in 2 different designs. The first one is a fan back, which looks a little bit like this. And then the other one is a circle back. I do not have these, but here's a picture. And the standard colors are, of course, red and blue, but they do come in other different colors, such as orange, purple, but they're harder to find and they're a lot more expensive. Now the faces of these cards are completely standard. Everything is exactly the same to your normal bicycle deck of playing cards that you could buy at like Target, Toys R Us, or whatever. Everything's the same except for 3 cards, which are the Jokers and the Ace of Spades. And they look a bit like this. You got the 2 Jokers. Now as far as handling these cards, once you get them out of the box, they feel a little bit sharp on the edges. They're a little bit stiff, but they are kind of, they're slippery, which makes them good for fans and spreads. They're made with a linoid finish, which is designed to make the cards last a bit longer than the air cushion finish. And as far as I can tell, they aren't lying. This linoid finish has held up pretty well. I have 2 of these decks. This first one I've had for about a few months, and I take this everywhere. I've had this deck dropped in the dirt so many times, and it's just held up beautifully. You can still see there are a few clumps still in the fans, but that's a small complaint for what I'm getting out of this deck. Now, as far as this deck goes, I've had this for almost a year now. This is actually the same deck I filmed the Not Impressed video with. Link is right up here. This is the deck that I keep amazing care of. I always wash my hands before I use this deck, but these have held up absolutely beautifully. Look at that fan. Once you break these cards in, they're like a dream to handle. One thing that I do want to point out is that if you're doing any magic, this is a good deck because it's really standard and it's not going to pop out to lay people or muggles, if you will. It isn't going to pop out as a trick deck. People are going to think this is a normal deck of cards. So our next deck I do not have, but it's the Aladdin deck of playing cards. Now this is a standard deck of cards, of course, for the Ace of Spades and the Jokers. It's different. But what really makes this deck unique is the finish that it has on it. Now, with a normal linoid finish or air cushion finish deck, you get like these little bumps on the cards, as you can see. There's little like pockets there, and what that does is it traps air in between the cards, so when you it makes spreads and fans a lot easier to do. But on the Aladdin deck of cards, instead of these tiny little indents that you get on these cards, it's just completely smooth. And what that does is that it keeps the packets together, it makes the cards stick together, which makes the deck really good for packet and aerial flourishes because the packets just stay together. It doesn't fan amazingly, but it's not meant for fanning. So the next deck I'm going to talk about I actually do not have, but they are the Fontaines by Zach Mueller. He came out with 3 different versions of this deck. All 3 were funded with Kickstarter. He first started out with a red deck, and then he went on to blue, and then finally, really recently, he made a black edition of this deck. All 3 decks are completely identical except for the color of the back design, the color of the Ace of Spades, and the color of the Jokers. Everything else should be exactly the same. As far as the design goes, I think Zach Mueller wanted to go with something that was extremely simplistic, and I think he did achieve that goal. The faces are completely standard. The only differences in the faces are, of course, the Ace of Spades, the Jokers, and the few extra cards that you get with the deck. Everything else is the same. Now, as far as handling goes, I've heard that the Fontaines handle similarly to the bikes because they both have a nice, thick, substantial stock, and they both spread and fan very well. So if you aren't willing to spend like $50 or $60 on a red version of this Fontaine deck, I think instead you should just take a walk to Target and pick up one of these, because they aren't that much different. The only thing that's different from the Fontaines are the back design, the Ace of Spades, Jokers, the extra ad cards, and the box. Everything else should be exactly the same. So that's it for the non-existent Fontaines. Now we're moving on. Okay, now we're gonna go on to the Smoke and Mirrors deck of playing cards by Dan and Dave. Now there are 8 different versions of this deck, I think. There's a few black and white ones. There's a blue version, a red version, a green version, a gray version, and then the final one was a private reserve, which is gold. But this is one of the first versions, and this is a tan deck of cards. And the nice thing about these cards is that they come with 2 sets of different jokers, and they don't have ad cards. But all the faces are standard. You are going to get a little bit of color difference in the pips and the court cards throughout the different versions of the deck. The Ace of Spades is like this. Now, what makes this deck really special is their handling. Now, right out of the box, right when I first opened these, they just spring amazingly. These feel really light. They feel really thin, which makes it easy for springs, lapel spreads, dribbles, everything like that. And the box is pretty cool too, So the final deck that I'm going to be reviewing are the Virtuoso deck of playing cards. These cards are made by a group of people called the Virts from Singapore. There are 3 different versions of this deck. The first one looks like this. The second one is the one that I am about to review right now. And the third one just came out extremely recently, which looks a little bit like this. I actually have one coming in the mail right now, but it didn't come in time to get in this video. One thing that I want to point out is that these cards do not come with jokers, but instead they come with 4 kind of ad information cards. And you can line them up to make a really cool pattern like this, which is similar to the back design of the cards themselves. Now, the back design is a twin tip design, so that means when you fan them one way, you're going to get a certain color, and if you fan them a different way, you're going to get another color. But you can still flip some cards over and some cards the other way, and you're still going to get that same design all the way. So apparently these cards are the first and only cards to be designed for the art of cardistry. And as far as I can tell, they've held up to their name pretty well. The back design looks amazing in just everything. Fans, spreads. These cards were just as designed to amaze and look really good in certain types of flourishes. Now onto the faces. The black cards are actually blue, and the red cards are orange. And the pips are all diagonal. They're smaller. The court cards are really cool as well. I'll just go over them really quickly. But of course, the best card in this deck is of the Ace of Spades, which is just a really unique card, I think. As far as handling, once you get this deck in the mail and you first open them up, they feel really springy and they feel really thin. If you are into cardistry, or if you're trying to get into cardistry, this deck is just an all-rounder for everything. Things look good. Like if you look at a fan with a regular tally-ho deck of cards, that just looks so boring compared to what you're getting with this and what you can get the other way. So yeah, those are the 5 decks of cards that I see usually linked to cardistry these days. All the links are going to be in the description below for an in-depth review and the link if you want to purchase any of these cards. So I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next time.